Today's scripture comes from Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Here ends the reading.
Well, 2023 is coming to an end, and historians have already begun to pontificate as to what it is that we will remember about or recall from 2023. One editorial I read last week said that 2023 will forever be remembered as the year of escalation. For back in March, due to a banking collapse, inflation escalated. When it comes to violence around the world, in the Middle East and the Far East, tensions and violence escalated, to say the least. And when it comes to politics in this nation on the brink of an election year, a presidential election year, there have been polarizations and escalation as it relates to politics in this country. And coming off of this year when everything has escalated, I do wonder if there is a temptation to adopt, a defeatist attitude when it comes to anything that might happen that is new, either in our own lives or in the life of our world. And this attitude or reluctance to embrace anything new really collides with, when you think about it, the attitude of the wise men. You'll recall the story. 3 wise men followed the star. They came from the east, and when they arrived into the presence of Christ, they brought forth gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These 3 gifts were prophesied about in the Hebrew Bible, not only in Psalm 72, but also in Isaiah 60. And perhaps what you've been taught over the course of your lifetime in Sunday school is that each one of those gifts was symbolic of a role that Jesus would go on to play in his adult life. For example, the gold was a way of honoring Jesus as king. The frankincense would honor Jesus as priest, and the myrrh as Jesus is going on to be a suffering servant. That's been the tradition of historic Orthodox Christianity over the years, and I have no desire to disavow you of that tradition whatsoever. But I simply want to suggest back to you something else about these gifts that the wise men brought to the feet of Jesus that could make this scripture even that much more interesting for all of us to consider. Many historians believe that the wise men came from the east, and they were part of Zoroastrian tradition, Zoroastrian priests even. And in Zoroastrian tradition in the Far East, there was a history of those three gifts brought to the feet of Jesus, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, being very important symbols in that culture. So perhaps what the wise men did in that moment is they brought with them these old elements of their old ways of life, if you will, of their old culture, of where they used to live, and they brought those gifts to the feet of Christ. And maybe, just maybe, if this is the case, then part of what the story of the wise men teaches me and teaches all of us is that when we're willing to bring that which is old in our lives to the feet of Christ, it's an extraordinary gift to offer to God as to what God might do to go on to make us new and to go on to make our world new. Which perhaps prompts a question on this New Year's Eve. What is it that maybe we need to leave in 2023? What's old that God would benefit from if we were to deliver that to the feet of Christ in these days following Christmas? Perhaps it's an old habit in our lives of needing to people please or needing to worry or to control. Perhaps it's guilt that we have about something that happened in 2023 that didn't go really well. Or perhaps it's an old attitude in our lives that isn't serving us well. Or perhaps it's unforgiveness. What might we consider leaving in 2023 and gifting that to God because it's old? Now, I don't want to be self-helpy here or to reduce this story to just simply moralism when it comes to the wise men. But what I do want to do is suggest that there is this vast history in the New Testament of God taking what is old and then going on to do in someone's life a new thing with that person. The story of the wise men, of course, but so many other stories in the New Testament or references to this. You'll recall in Acts chapter 19, the story of the sorcerers who all burned their scrolls. They took what was old and they got rid of them, and then God did something new in their lives. Or perhaps consider Jesus in John's gospel when Jesus taught about the branches. You got to get rid of those dead branches if you want the new fruit to grow. Or consider Jesus in Matthew's gospel. You can't pour the new wine into those old wineskins. If you get rid of what is old, God is so enthusiastic about what might happen in your life, in my life, that is new. What if as part of our epiphany this year, we ought to consider leaving something behind in 2023. I know I'm speaking with a number of parents and grandparents this morning who have perhaps been with grandchildren over the holidays. And I was with my 4-year-old over the holidays, and we were constructing one of those pre-made gingerbread houses that come in a plastic kit. These are houses where the gingerbread is the siding of the house and the glue attaches everything together is the icing. And I took this on with my 4-year-old, and Dad didn't read the instructions, and so our entire house was just a wreck and collapsed. But I had a second one of these kits, and I recall taking everything that was old, everything that didn't work, and just moving it aside and starting with something that was brand new. And I remember my 4-year-old looked up at me with these extremely excited eyes, like there is something that could be possible here. I do wonder if when we get rid of something old, God has those eyes toward each one of us, what might happen, what could be possible, where there might be hope. For God would go on to say in the book of Revelation, "Behold, I can make all things new." Surely God's excited when we leave something old behind as to what that might lead to that lies ahead. And you say, well, all right, preacher, this works for, wise men who are following a star or 4-year-olds who are making a gingerbread house. But how does this really work in the real world? And I share back with you, consider the age-old business wisdom of Darren Clark. Remember that name from many years ago? He was the CEO of Kimberly Smith. And his research in this area recently got publicized by Jim Collins, a Stanford MBA. And he was responsible for sharing back with CEOs and with companies that if you're a good CEO or a 4-star CEO, you wake up every morning and you make a to-do list. But if you want to be a great CEO and lead a 5-star company, you will wake up every morning and make a stop-doing list. And according to business researchers, CEOs who are willing to make a stop-doing list are far more productive than the ones who wake up in the morning and make a to-do list. Wise men and women know that there is a certain intelligence about taking what is old and allowing something new to happen when you stop doing it, when you leave it behind, when you let it go, when you say that something new could in fact be possible. I'll close this morning with a reminder of one of the more heartwarming stories that we've been reading about this Christmas season, the story of Jimmy Santos. You'll recall that this was the gentleman in the state of Illinois who spent 42 years of his life wrongly incarcerated in a prison cell in Illinois. That was a record for the state of Illinois for someone wrongly convicted. And Santos was released from prison 11 days before Christmas. And in returning back to his family, he thought about all that had happened with him in those 42 years. And he decided that he had to make some changes in his life, like getting used to not eating anymore with a spork, but rather with metal silverware. And he also decided he needed to do something new in learning how to use an iPhone and getting used to asking Siri questions on that phone. And he talked about the struggle of embracing that which was new. And on Christmas Eve at his Catholic church, Santos decided to bring 42 roses, each one commemorating a year of his life that was incarcerated. And he decided to lie them down on the communion table, not only as a way of saying thank you to God for being there for him during that moment, but as a way of providing closure, that he wanted to take that which was old, and even in the later years of his life, embrace that new territory that God had for him. What do you have that you could leave in 2023? Gold, frankincense, myrrh, a shell, 42 roses? Leave it in 2023 and behold in the one who says, I can make all things new.